the recording, or do you want me to do it?
You do it. I'm not touching this.
There we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Statewide Planning and Budget Committee meeting. My name's Kirby Fye. I'm with the department. I'm sure you're all familiar with me. Just a few things I need to go over. As you know, the executive order was not extended, but due to COVID-19 precautions and just to keep everyone safe, we're holding this meeting electronically per the Open Meetings Act. So with that being said, the meeting will be recorded and will be posted to the department website within the next day or two. Also, if you're speaking, please make sure that you state your name. It's helpful when capturing the minutes. And also, please keep your phone or your computer muted. Phone or computer muted if you're not speaking, just to prevent any feedback from coming through. I'm going to go ahead and go through the attendance, and then I'll hand it over to you, Ben.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
like I said, Kirby Fye with the department. We have Avis Easley also with the department, Amy Holland with the department, and Kurt Hipple with the department. We have Ben Harrington, Jeff Flayden, Robin Nobling, Debbie Hillen, Gail Lodato, and Kim Parker all on the call. Have I missed anyone? I don't think so.
Yeah, Kirby, hi. This is Elisa LaPolte.
Oh, Elisa, Tennessee. I'm sorry. Elisa LaPolte. Okay. Sorry about that. I had it marked down too.
No
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I'm going to go over and hand it over to you, Ben. If you need me to share any documents, let me know.
Okay, well, first let's pose that question to those on the call. Do you all have those documents before you? Or do you need us to share anything?
Kirby, this is Robin. I'm driving, but I'll get to where I'm going pretty soon, and I'll be able to open up and review.
Okay, so Kirby, if you would, let's just try to first share the document that says the multiple needs for regional councils and committee.
Okay, let me pull that up.
That one is very informative.
Ben,
sir,
can I request a favor here? Well, my camera may not be on. I don't know. Can you review the purpose? What we're doing exactly. I did see the documents, but this is my first time on this committee. And what are we doing exactly?
Yeah, no, that is fine. So let me review the purpose of the meeting. You know, the federal block grant legislation required states to receive the federal block grants. They also needed to set up planning councils, and in the code which establishes planning councils, there is language that speaks to the planning council shall conduct a annual needs assessment and recommend to the state, i.e. the commissioner, and to the governor, needs of its citizens. And so the state of Tennessee, through the State Mental Health Planning Council, conducts an annual needs assessment process. The State Planning Council also is blessed because I think we're one of the few states that has actual regional planning councils. So we have sort of a two-part system. The regional planning councils conduct more localized needs assessments and funnel upwards, if you will, the needs assessment recommendations or gaps in services that they have identified locally. And then those go to the state council. At the same time, on a parallel track, there are needs assessment processes conducted by the Children's Mental Health Subcommittee, the Adult Mental Health Subcommittee, and the Consumer Advisory Board. So both sets of needs assessment recommendations then get merged, and that's where they come together today for the State Planning Council to begin the process of making some review and recommendations to the executive committee and then onward to the commissioner. So I did that off the top of my head and tried to extract all the historical knowledge from 26 years involved with the planning council. So I'm going to ask Avis and Kurt, did I get that one correct in explaining that process and why we're here with these recommendations today?
Hey Ben, this is Avis. Hi everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. The only thing I would say is it's a statutory requirement through Title 33 for us to also do that needs assessment process every year. So just wanted to throw that in. Otherwise, Ben, you're a champion.
Well, Ben, I do have a follow-up here. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm familiar with the and have participated in the needs assessment piece. It's the budget part that I was more intrigued about and wondering about that. What the budget, how the budget piece comes in. Like, are we going to be figuring out priorities if budget is available for certain things or anything like that? Or that was more my question, is the budget piece specifically.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, historically, when the state budget has not been as robust, that is when the real budgetary drama has unfolded from the planning council to the legislators and the governor, because in the code it does give us oversight responsibility to make budgetary recommendations if the budget is not sufficient to support the needs of its citizens. So we certainly are blessed with some better times now in 2021 budgetarily than I remember back in the mid 2000s when the budget got really, really tense and lots of things were slated to be cut. But again, I'll turn to Avis and Kurt and ask you all to chime in on Jeff's question about the budgetary side of this.
Hey, Jeff, this is Kurt. I think it goes hand in hand with the needs assessment. The regions and the adult, children's, and CAB, I believe, are making their needs known. Those go into that 3-year plan, but they're also needs that might need to be rolled up into a budgetary proposal that you'll see commissioner make annually to the governor. And I think if you look on this multiple needs document, there have been some really responsive budgetary requests based on some of these things that are identified year after year. I'm looking at the increased student or school-based mental health education services and screenings, of course, the CAB, not CAB, sorry, the CHI has seen a lot of additional funding over the last 3 years. And I think that the needs being identified by the different regions, as well as that being, Commissioner Williams, that was a project that she started. I think that informed a lot of the decision making around that. So the needs help with the planning part, but they also help with considerations around what budget items need to be pushed forward.
Well, let me just make, yeah, it does. And I'm going to make a statement, and could be wrong, but I'm going to make a statement that I have personally gone to the commissioner and asked her to please consider putting money in her budget, for example, for CIT expansion in Tennessee. But maybe it might have been smarter for me to have been more vocal working through the various regional policy and planning councils and encouraging that need to go up. But there, there's a finite amount of needs from each place. So I guess what I'm asking is, well, I'm not asking, I'm reflecting that it might be kind of better for everybody to kind of be considered to follow them through this process instead of people just knocking on the door and saying, hey, we think we need X, and we think, I'm sure it's hard for the department. You have to juggle so many requests along with, what comes through the policy and planning. But I think that, we have maybe an opportunity to try and get more budget requests go through that and kind of be vetted. And I'm thinking out loud too, and I won't be talking at length about every little piece as we go, but there could be some things that a lot of people see as important, and then other things really important but aren't widely known. Like IPS. I wonder if IPS would ever make it through, or if it ever has. So I will listen and watch, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and this helps very much what you've shared to ground me.
Well, Jeff, your comments are extremely important. My best advice after sitting here for 26 years with the Planning Council and being involved with planning a budget for a long time is really to suggest you do both approaches. It doesn't hurt to advocate your position at the Planning Council levels and at the regional council levels, and it doesn't hurt to advocate your position through other avenues. So I would do any and all of that. And that's my best advice to you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. We
lost you, Jeff.
You're on mute, Jeff. Take your mute off.
I don't know how I did that. No, I appreciate that, and we have participated, but I think some things like caregiver involvement in planning is probably a harder one to get past a lot of people. But these multiple approaches, I think it's great, and I just appreciate the chance to be here. And you have a very strong NAMI contingent in the committee today, probably more than usual. So I appreciate the chance to participate.
Right. Okay, so let's move this conversation, if we could. Let's have before us this document, which is the multiple needs for regional councils and the committees. And I need to just ask the group. Let's start weigh in on what stands out from this document. Any conclusions anyone can draw?
Then I'll be walking into my office to be able to open my computer, take a look at that, and I'll respond. But
okay.
I know one of the things that and I know you were part of this, one of the things we looked at was the workforce survey, and and something that popped up amongst multiple councils. And just for Jeff to understand, so that might be another thing for you to know is, as we do each council does its needs assessment. The department's always going to look to see what pops up across multiple councils and what rises to the top. So with you guys being the state office, you might have the ability to represent on multiple councils. So that might be something for you to look at. And we'll start our needs assessment work again in November. We do a consensus workshop in Region 4. So anyway, so Ben, I'll be hopping on that soon.
Right. Well, Robin, you're right on target. The workforce development issue, and it's written up in differing ways depending on who the author was in the various regions, but was cited as certainly a need by regions 1, 2, and 3. And the adult committee on the mental health side, and then cited by regions 3, 4, and 6 on the substance abuse side. So clearly, this is not a standalone issue for mental health services or for substance abuse services. It is the predominant issue for the behavioral health system as identified by the needs assessment process.
I concur with that. I hear more and more about it everywhere I turn around.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is an exciting time to be in the business. It's also a distressing time to be in the business. It's exciting because we've got so much focus now being put on mental health and behavioral health, and more folks seeking help than ever before, but also distressing because it's harder for folks to find a place because of our workforce shortages and stuff like that. So it is a hugely important issue. Anything else stand out for anybody in this?
Okay, here I go again, but I paused first. On the children and youth, I have more of a question because I've heard from youth villages how they're doing a lot of face-to-face mobile crisis intervention. I think even more than on the adult side. So is the issue that about where to take children like a CSU, or do we know why it's a? I've seen this up here for many years, and it's why. What is the issue there? Because I think we've got the mobile crisis. Is it receiving centers for those that need that, or can someone tell me a little bit more?
Hi.
Gail, is that your hand up to answer that?
It is.
Okay.
I'm in Region 3, and you kind of hit it, John. It is definitely, when you look at that word continuum, yes, there's crisis services for sure, but with our adult population, there are the CSUs, and something like that we believe would be beneficial, so that it's not a determination of does the child go home or to the hospital, but there is an opportunity for some extended crisis work to help stabilize and prevent a hospitalization.
Makes sense.
The other thing I'm going to speak, this is Robin. The other issue with children is children's residential treatment. We're very, very frustrated. You'll see this keep reappearing in the needs assessment, because we still have too many children being shipped out of state or far from their homes in order to get intensive treatment. And that is a big issue.
Sounds like it to me, yeah. I mean, I've seen this for years on here. I agree with it.
Ben, this is Debbie. The first thing I thought of when I saw all of these was, wow, the needs are widespread across the state based on regions. It didn't seem like there was as higher number grouped in any certain area other than the workforce development type deal. But I just saw a widespread of needs, and it was all based geographically when you looked at it. And that was the first thing that caught my attention when I looked at it.
Yeah, that's kind of intriguing, isn't it? Debbie, have you got any notion as to why that might be?
You know, we sometimes jokingly say, you know, we got 3 grand divisions in the state, and the needs are very clearly delineated, I think, between what those grand divisions are. You know, I don't know that I have a thing. I just I meant to pull up last year's to see what the grouping looked like last year as compared to this year. But I know on the substance abuse side, it was widespread.
Yeah.
There wasn't any just one thing that just majorly picked up on anything except the kit for the at-risk youth and the funding for detoxing beds. But I just found that a little interesting that it was widespread this year.
Yeah. Hey, Miss
And I don't
Kirby.
know if COVID had it to, with that or not.
Yeah. Miss Kirby, are you able to pull up last year's document that's similar to this?
Hold on one second. So I have it saved on our the file I have it saved on. I have to be connected to the network, and it keeps kicking me off. So let me see if I can get that.
How about that? Let's not trouble yourself with that. Let's just would you mind sending it to us after the meeting?
Sure.
That way you don't have to worry about your server kicking you off or anything like that.
Sure.
Okay. There was another thing that I noticed. Both the CAB and the adult committee on the mental health side indicated a need for some transitional housing. And on the substance abuse side, there was the need referenced by both the adult committee and Region 1 for more recovery housing. So they both aren't quite the same, but they both reach the same conclusion that we need more types of housing. And so I know we're doing great work with CHI trying to create more housing, and in prior years, the emphasis was added to add more recovery housing. So I know that's being worked on, but I do want to use point of privilege as chair of the committee and remind folks that the transitional housing that's identified has been on here multiple times, but you got to go back into the 2000s to probably see it the first time. And in those days, when it was identified as a need of Region 2, it was actually referenced as a need based on folks who were homeless admits to the RMHIs actually had a much higher recidivism rate upon discharge because they were being discharged back to homelessness. So that the need identified in those days was some sort of transitional, something less than hospital stay, but something a whole lot more than being discharged back to a shelter.
Hey, Ben.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
This is Debbie.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. One of the things, kind of like you, Ben, I've been around the block for a little while and got a lot of the history. The increase in recovery housing, at least I know on the substance abuse side, having been the recipient of funding from HUD for many years for transitional and recovery type housing. HUD got to the point that they started making it extremely difficult. So the funds early in the 1995 to about 2000, I don't know, 15, let's say, there was an abundance of funds that you could apply for this type of housing. But then HUD got to ratcheting down who you could serve in the house, and they started restricting who was eligible and restriction of the funds. So it became to the point that many of us no longer had access to the financial funding that was needed, that where we built, I mean, we built up over 25 years, 650 units of housing. Okay. You can't do that today. Now, the Chi 2, all that is great, and so forth. But it's still just a drop in the bucket. But even all the restrictions of housing put it, so many of us who are housing providers these days, or have been over all the years, are taking some of those off of the recovery housing list and putting them in low income rental, because the restrictions is a lot less. And in those houses, recovery housing just doesn't look quite as, I'm trying to couch my words. If I pick recovery housing over low income rental, I'm probably going to go low income rental. Not because I don't think there's a need for recovery housing, and I still have a lot of recovery housing type similar to that we put people in, but the restrictions and the regulations have gotten so much that it outcosts us out of doing business. Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense, but a change in HUD's philosophy was a big part.
Okay. So is there anything we do about that with regards to this need identified?
Well, the other thing with regard to recovery housing that I have, sometimes I need housing for people leaving treatment to go to, and they can't afford the recovery housing that's out. The recovery houses that are out there are wanting first and last month's rent. They're charging anywhere from 125 to 150 a week. These people don't have a job yet, and so they can't afford to go into recovery housing.
Yeah.
Ben, this is Robin. In Region 4, it wasn't so much recovery housing when it comes to substance use. It was recovery housing for people recovering from mental health issues. And we've seen great strides. The department's done a terrific job of leveraging, some of the funds that have come through for the development and building of housing. It's been fantastic. But we want to make sure that, and part of this is, I'll say, guys, it's probably more of a regional problem for us. I don't know if the rest of you are experiencing it, but in Region 4, because Nashville's growing so quickly, the group homes are being sold right out from under the residents, because it's just more profitable, to do that because of the housing market. And so, that was, we want to remind people that recovery housing is not just substance use. It is also mental health. And we know that you're going to have co-occurring, but usually somebody's going to be primary more one side than the other. And so, just as a reminder for the mental health recovery housing and group homes in particular, we've been losing them around here. I don't know if the rest of you are experiencing anything like that.
Oh, yeah. And that's true in Region 2.
Okay. So it, and the pandemic has really shown a light on this, because what we were finding, especially over the summer, was people who were fragile but maintaining were no longer maintaining, and they were going back to usually a parent's home or a family member's home, and they just were not in any good shape, but might not meet criteria to be hospitalized, or if they were, when they came out of the hospital, where were they going?
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Well, it's at that time of the agenda where we need to move away from the needs identified by the multiple regions. I'll take a final question or comment, but then we're going to need to move things along, or Kirby will get me.
Oh, one thing then too, last year's multiple needs by region, they're actually on the department website.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So I'll just send out that link.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, I think it's time to accept a motion to forward these to the executive committee for review and further forwarding to the commissioner.
So moved.
Who was that? Was
I'll
that
second.
Robin?
Robin.
Debbie.
No, that was, I didn't move, but I'll second.
Debbie was first, Robin was second. Okay, all in favor of forwarding the recommendations in their entirety to the department? Anyone opposed? Okay. So Kirby, I'll leave that to you to get that to the executive committee and onward up to the leadership team at the department. And now it's time for some conversation about the 3-year plan report. So Kirby, you want to tell us what we're supposed to do here?
Sorry, hold on. Yeah, so this is just reviewing. So as you may or may not know, every year the department does a 3-year plan, and they incorporate as many needs as they can into the development of the 3-year plan. This is FY21, the FY21 3-year plan. So it's looking at 2020 needs. And the February report, so the end is the reporting document. Let me get to there. And it basically just shows you how the department is doing. So you'll see their baseline from what was in FY20, what their target is in FY21, where they are for the first half of the year. And then obviously August reports will be submitted in August. So it's just kind of reviewing that. And, you know, offices and divisions change their goals, or not their goals, they can change their programs every year. So they don't have to wait 3 years. So that's basically what you would look at.
Kirby, could you describe the process here? You know, sort of relates to Jeff's question or from the beginning of the meeting. So we've done the needs assessments, the regional level. They've gone to the Planning and Budget Committee. Now they get to the Executive Committee and they get forwarded to the Commissioner. How does a recommended need make the leap from the needs assessment document we've just previously reviewed? How does it make the leap to the 3-year plan?
So once the needs assessment is complete and finalized, it's been reviewed by everyone, it's shared with the department. Okay, it's shared with all department staff. Every, I want to say June, July, they begin working on the next year's 3-year plan. So they'll look at last year's, whatever they worked on for last year, and they compare that with the needs assessment summary to see how they can incorporate some of those identified needs into their programs. Now, it might not be word for word, obviously, on what's submitted in the needs assessment summary, and not every need can be addressed as seen by, you know, the multiple needs by region document. You know, there's budgetary issues, there's issues where it's not just a department need, you'd have to incorporate other departments in it. So there's lots of things that come into play, but when each division and office is working on their 3-year plan, they're looking at the needs assessment document at the same time.
And so the 3-year plan document is, does that get to the federal level for review at some point? Or am I confusing documents?
No.
That you do a block grant report that goes to the
Yeah,
feds.
that's Avis.
So to
I'm
answer,
sure she's working on it right now.
oh yeah. So to answer your question regarding the federal level, Ben, how that plays into that is with the block grant, we have outcomes, goals, strategies, and outcomes in the mental health block grant. What we have tried to do over many years now, which has worked very successfully, is kind of collaborate and merge our documents to align with the 3-year plan and the mental health block grant. So as Kirby works on the 3-year plan, sending the needs assessment summary out to the department staff, they also look at that to see what goals, strategies, and outcomes they can put in the block grant. So literally the 3-year plan kind of helps shape the goals, strategies, outcome, data in the mental health block grant, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it does. There's a bit of a dovetailing.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Right. Good.
Yeah, and just as we report out on the 3-year plan in the February and August report, when I do the mental health block grant, then we'll report out on that plan in December as well for the outcomes.
Right. And do the feds still convene folks to review the block grant plan and the block grant report? Multiple states coming together to do those reviews?
So to answer your question, yes. And now since the pandemic and all of that, we usually have a block grant annual conference and all that state gets together. That's another level of that. But to answer your question, I have a project officer #1 who does that. And then there's a team of folk associated with the block grant. Her executive leadership team under SAMHSA, and then there's a reviewers that come from each state to look at that block grant. And so then they review that, and then they get back to me as far as a final approval for that block grant, as well as that block grant report.
Yep.
I think you traveled with us once before on that too, Ben.
Done it multiple times.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And done the data infrastructure grant meeting as well. So yes,
right.
Yeah,
right.
So that's a good
you're
stuff.
right.
So to try to bring everyone back in the loop, and I apologize for the sidebar. This is an extremely important process. Jeff's request for understanding it is extremely important because we're not just going through the motions here. When we, as volunteers working with the planning councils and the state council, we do the needs assessment process, and then we get to see where there's overlap from multiple regions or council subcommittees. We get to play a very important role in making these needs get identified, and then they get into the 3-year plan, and then they make their leap to the commissioner's budget requests and funding and stuff like that. So there's lots of dovetailing. It's not a process where we don't get any reward. It's just a process where we sometimes get the reward later rather than as soon as we would like. But it does work. I can tell you, Gail Lodato is sitting in Chattanooga, and back in the middle of the 2000s, there was one CSU. And what happened in those days were the other regions all started getting green with envy about the Chattanooga CSU. And Donna Maddox, who we all know used to be on the State Planning Council, still is involved with the Regional Council in Chattanooga, probably had every region come and do a site visit to see the Chattanooga CSU. And that is how those other regions ended up really confirming they wanted a CSU, they needed a CSU, how to figure out how to document the need to then be able to move things forward. And then when the other regions all started saying they wanted one and why and had the data to prove their need, then it moved the process along, and the commissioner in those days was able to work with TennCare to help make it happen. And of course, the Commissioner Williams was involved in that process back in those days as well. So it does work. So hang in there. You're going to get rewarded at some point here.
Hey, Ben, I just wanted to say, this is Kim. I just wanted to say thanks for bringing that up. Just yesterday, I was on a panelist discussion with the Council of State Governments, and just being a part of that and hearing the Council of State Governments are looking at CSUs across the state, and everybody had a different definition of that, and heard people in larger areas talking about how their system was pretty much broken as far as, well, we've got a CSU, but we don't have the full continuum that goes with that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important that the people across in all of our different regions understand that this process, just like you said, it does work, because that's what it is. The needs assessment is looking at where those gaps are. And we've been able to, over the years, like you and Debbie, I know, we've been a part of this for a long time, and we've definitely seen it evolve. And, looking at what those gaps are, and that going into the 3-year plan will eventually, it also will eventually make its way into that block grant, and the federal block grant. And so we have definitely seen, and they were, when I talked about the continuum of services that we have, and not just within the crisis service, but we're able to refer to, the housing through CHI and homeless services that all kind of roll up underneath the department and are given out to the providers. And so they were very impressed, because they're like, well, our state says, okay, you open a CSU, but they don't give you the resources that lead up to that as part of the continuum. So
right.
I just want to say thanks for bringing that up, because it is very vital. Everybody understand how the process works.
Yeah, Kim, you brought up a great point. We can talk with our colleagues across the country, and I remember back in the day when TennCare first started in 1994, people would say, "Oh, aren't you so proud?" And we were like rolling our eyes, because we weren't proud of TennCare in those days. But now those conversations switch, and on a national call, I think it was last week, we were talking about crisis continuum, and some folks were talking about CSUs, and I said, Tennessee has 7 CSUs, and in the East Grand Division we have 3 CSUs, and soon to get a 4th, or maybe it's already open by now, in Morristown, and we have a behavioral health urgent care center, which was a new critter for those folks on the call. So I then had to put on the hat to try to explain why CSUs are not really the place for law enforcement to be taking folks to, but have something that, another type of facility where law enforcement can divert people who typically would be charged with a misdemeanor and go to jail, but who could be diverted into a treatment place, and then eventually join other services. So, yeah. So anyway, it's now time to move this agenda along, unless anyone is waving at me, and I see no.
Well, Ben, here, I'm going to wave.
Okay.
Okay. This is really fascinating to me, because I've been part of the pre-arrest diversion task force, as has others on this call. The that got money for walk-in centers and working a lot more with law enforcement now.
Yep.
When they say they don't have a place to take somebody other than jail or emergency rooms, which they may stick in an emergency room for quite a while, I'm surprised that it didn't show up in the regional needs assessments, and it tells me probably there weren't a lot of concerned law enforcement people attending those meetings. But it's more on my radar now. So that got funded, but it didn't go through this process. There was this task force. I mean, that was broad community grassroots task force. So I do think, next, I hope that when we put out the call for accessible walk-in centers, I hope that it'll rise up. I know that's not for now because of the process, but you've certainly raised my awareness of this tool.
Well, and I'll tell you, the the Knoxville Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center, Jeff, it was a very long process. It started with a federal court order for jail overcrowding, and eventually, led to, the mayor creating a mental health task force with the judges and law enforcement, and we were involved, and then that evolved into getting some technical assistance from CSG, which I wrote the grant for, to bring folks in to study both the CJ system and the mental health system and figure out what we needed. And that's when they got those recommendations. Of course, everyone pointed their fingers at each other saying, we'll contribute some money if you will. And not everyone was on the same page. And it took a while to finally leverage the money to get it in place to be able to do anything. But to your point, that it is an extremely important issue, but the planning councils are not really the place where law enforcement are going to hang out and want to participate in any process. So we have to figure out how to leverage their insights to make recommendations, and Judge Eisenstein's task force or diversion committee might be the place that would be helpful there. So I need to move the agenda. Kirby's going to yank me or punch me for running late. She has on the agenda dates and times or future agenda items for future meetings. So how often do you want to meet, folks? Yes,
Ben,
Avis.
this is Avis. Before we move on, I think Kim had, Kim, did you have another question or comment? I see your hand up before we moved on. I just didn't want to overlook you.
Oh, I didn't mean it. It shouldn't still be up. Let me take it down.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, Ben. I just didn't want to overlook Kim.
That's all right. I saw it was still up, and I just assumed, well, since she'd already just talked about that other issue, then she was done. But thank you. I should have been a gentleman and asked. So, question for the group: how often do you want to meet?
Well, I have a question first that will help with this. I keep hearing large amounts federal money coming around, and if we could be, if a group like this could be helpful in some recommendations as new unexpected money shows up, if that's helpful, that'd be great to talk about. If that's not the situation, then less need to meet maybe.
Well, I think there were 2 rounds of money. There was the December federal block grant edition, and then there was the March federal mental health block grant edition and substance abuse edition. And I think they're labeling those, actually, the March is the COVID mental health or substance abuse block grant editions. So I think, Jeff, one thing you can always do is contact the deputy commissioners you work closely with to see if they've made their decisions there, or do they need ideas, right? I think that's always an avenue that should be open to you as a grantee here in the state. The other is, I think we keep working this needs assessment process, because that's what helps the department make their decisions. And sometimes they're going to turn right back to the needs assessments that have been collected over the prior years and identify a need based on that, and then they'll try to fill the need. But it does make sense for us to pass through Kirby and Avis and Kurt the request to keep the planning council's planning and budget committee involved in that process. And if we need to, convene to deliberate over some of the needs and help prioritize things a little bit better for the department moving forward as federal monies arise, we can certainly make our time available to the department.
Ben, this is Avis. I can speak to that. As I am the author of the Block Grant application and all of that information that you spoke about, the additional monies, I'm definitely involved in that. I can tell you to the committee, and particularly to you, Jeff, since you brought up that question, Division of Mental Health Services, I can speak to that specifically since it's related to since they work with me in conjunction with the Block Grant, Mental Health Block Grant. They are, as we speak, have contacted providers and agencies and others to actually see how a piece of that money can be carved out for them to be able to use at their disposal. And an interesting point is that they are actually involving the council. So they are contacting the chairs of each council to ask them to give input, that council to give input based on the needs assessment of how they see this money being involved, how they can use this money. This process is going on as we speak. So you as a member of the Region 4 Council, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, would have the opportunity through that process with Robin Noblin as chair of that council to give some council input on those funds, and particularly if needed, using those needs assessments already in place, current and past, that has been completed by those needs. So I just wanted to let you know that that process is in fact in place as we speak.
Great.
So that circles us back to the question I was asking. How often do you want to meet?
How often do you want to meet, Ben?
Well, I think we could reasonably meet once a quarter if that's going to be acceptable to folks. But we're also going to have to make sure that we do some tag teaming on an email to identify an issue to be discussing. I don't want to meet just to meet. Y'all are very busy. You got programs and services you're building in your regions, that sort of thing. So,
Ben,
but
I would.
Hey, Ben,
this is
could I
Debbie, I'd say
suggest
quarterly.
Debbie says quarterly too. Kurt, you were going to chime in, sir.
Yeah, I was gonna, and quarterly's fine. Y'all are your own committee. Y'all can choose how often you meet. I was gonna suggest, to your point, that you want to make sure you have something to discuss, that you meet at the call of the chair. If there were new news that came down, that you felt like that the committee needed to talk about, then the chair could set up that, work through Avis and Kirby and Amy to set up that meeting. But again, it's up to y'all. Y'all are the committee. Y'all do what y'all feel is need. But I do think that your point about actually having something to discuss is important.
Well, why don't we take that as a friendly amendment to meet quarterly or otherwise at the will of the chair? Okay, we got thumbs up. We're good. We're good.
Good work.
All right. So do we need to recap the business, or we understand what's transpired today? We're all good. All right, I'm going to let y'all go. Kurt and Avis and Kirby, could you hang on for a minute with me, please?
Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
Sure. Thanks,
Sure
everyone.
thing.
Bye, have a good day.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.